Pues quédate aquí al ladito y ya no me pasa el correo. Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por estar acá con nosotros. Desde la División de Ciencias de la Comunicación y Diseño, el Departamento de Tecnologías de la Información, la Maestría en Diseño, Información y Comunicación, le damos la bienvenida a Scott Redberg. Scott es el director del Centro de Narrativas Digitales en la Universidad de Bergen, en Noruega. Rafael, profesor del Departamento de Tecnologías de la Información, nos va a dar una breve semblanza de él y posteriormente le daremos la palabra a Scott para que nos hable de su plática que tiene que ver con inteligencia artificial generativa. Y bueno, adelante Rafael. Muchas gracias.
Muy bien. Rápido les leo la semblanza. Scott Redberg es el director del Centro de Narrativa Digital en la Universidad de Bergen y es profesor de Cultura Digital en el Departamento de Estudios Lingüísticos, Literarios y Estéticos de la misma universidad allá en Noruega. Antes de mudarse a Noruega en el 2006, él dirigió la especialización en estudios de nuevos medios del programa de literatura en Richard Stockholm College en Nueva Jersey. Es autor y coautor de obras de literatura electrónica de extensión novelística como The Unknown, Kind of Blue, Implementation. Su trabajo ha sido exhibido tanto en línea como en espacios artísticos, incluyendo la Bienal de Venecia, el Bolt Center en Irvine, California, la Foundation en Filadelfia y el Kramer Art Museum. Scott Redberg es cofundador y el primer director ejecutivo de la organización sin fines de lucro Electronic Literature Organization, donde dirigió importantes proyectos financiados por la Fundación Ford y la Fundación Rockefeller. Realmente estoy muy contento, muy feliz de que tengamos la oportunidad de tenerte, Scott. Thank you so much for coming.
Gracias.
And visiting us. It's
Yeah.
for us a big honor.
And thank you all for coming as well. Rafael told me he thought probably 10 people would show up. I think there's going to be simultaneous translation, and I tried to put some of the slides in Spanish, although I don't speak Spanish, so it's machine translation. So if things don't make sense, blame it on AI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some experiments that I've been doing with authorship with AI. Of course, there's a lot of different problems with this that Rafael can tell you about. But I'm very interested in how human authors, human artists are beginning to work with these tools while sort of retaining some agency and some authorship at the same time as we're exploring all these amazing new capabilities. So the main question is, what do LLMs and things like text-to-image generation, text-to-video generation mean for authorship? What happens to the author, to the writer after this? And as I said, whenever we talk about AI, we need to first sort of bracket some problems with AI, because of course the models were trained on harvested data that nobody gave these massive corporations permission to use. Of course, we're consuming massive amounts of energy. These data centers and miniature nuclear power plants are being built specifically for AI computation. Many of the corporations involved are not necessarily good people. I'm not very happy that Elon Musk has a big role in AI. There's, of course, copyright concerns for people who are worried about that. There's deep fakes that might affect our politics. There's a lot of fraud and hucksterism that's going on right now, and in many ways sort of unharnessed development, among other things. Still, as an artist, as an author, I'm interested in the creative possibilities of this new medium or media because I think it's in many ways going to be the future of many types of practice, not necessarily all artistic practice. I think handmade art will still be very important. So my main question is, what's the human function, what I call the human function, within AI-driven creativity? Sorry, I got copied there. In what ways will humans remain essential to the process of creative practice with AI? And how will this environment, in a way, operate on authors? And how will they operate within it? And I should say artists, filmmakers, many different types of narrative artists. As we have an expert in the room, Rafael Perez y Perez, will tell you text generation has been around since the very beginnings of the computer. One of the early examples, for example, is a friend of Alan Turing's, Christopher Strecky, who wrote a love letter generator in 1952. So it is one of the oldest and most active forms of electronic literature still. There's very many people creating poetry generation systems, narrative generation systems with a whole bunch of techniques, ranging from sort of these slot-style generators to symbolic AI. And I describe these as semi-aleatory, somewhat based on chance, computational processes that have a poetic structure and human writing with individual authors who supply the vocabulary. So we need to remember that AI isn't the only, nor at present necessarily the best, computational process that's involved in literary text generation. And in fact, right now, very recently, you see a trend of a lot of books being put out where authors are publishing the outputs of these text generators and having them appreciated in codex form, in book form. One of these, just as an example, I always give a travesty generator by Lillian Yvonne Bertram. She did a modification of one of the earliest narrative generators, and then she took it and changed the content and turned it to be about American race relations, African-American situation in America. And that book was actually nominated for a National Book Award. And of course, we have an important program here and a book that corresponds to it, Mexica by Rafael Perez y Perez. So when we think about AI, LLMs as a writing system, I need to ask myself, what kind of writing machine is this? What kind of literary machine is this? You think about what's involved. This is a computational system that's trained on probably the largest corpus of human texts ever assembled, at least for a computer. It's trained on a massive corpus of human imagery data, in the case of text generation systems. So this is not a typewriter, right? This is not a word processing program. And I always also say, it's not something that simply should be doing the writing for you. And in fact, it's not that. It's always a dialogic process between a human and a complex computer system. So how do large language models work? This is probably old hat for some of you in the room. But this is basically how they work. If you give it a word, it predicts the most likely next word, like something called n-grams did. However, it's sort of like this on steroids in that it's breaking these words into small units called tokens, which are roughly word-sized pieces. And then it uses patterns learned from these millions of texts to decide what should come next. And it's generating these responses one token at a time, building complete thoughts. And then it's recognizing further patterns as it does this, further parameters in the system. It's very important to understand that it's not understanding. what it's doing. It's not thinking like humans do, but it's this incredibly good pattern recognition system in language that gives us back language, averaged language, you might say. So it has this multi-headed attention. It's looking at the relationships between words and paying attention to multiple connections. So it's when you give it a prompt, it's analyzing every word that relates to every other word in your prompt, and then creating a mathematical map of those relationships in a vector space, and then using multiple attention heads to focus on different types of connections simultaneously. So the very simple example there, the cat sat on the mat. It's connecting sat, so the cat did the action, and it's connecting sat with mat, where the action happens. So it's not just a simple one after the other, it's also one after the other, and this is a vector between multiple words that are occurring on a large scale. So one of the things that I always think is interesting for me as somebody who did do some text generation earlier, and I've done a lot of work, my work in electronic literature connects to randomness. I think this is a tradition that goes back to even like the Dada cut-ups. There's a tradition of looking at randomness, constrained randomness, as a creative process. So this does occur to a certain degree in LLMs. There's stochastic sampling. So instead of always picking the most likely word, it sometimes chooses from several good options. That prevents, I'm sure that you're familiar with entering prompts into ChatGPT or some other LLM, and you'll get different responses most of the time. They'll always be kind of close related, but they'll be different, right? So why does this matter for writing? I think it makes the conversations less predictable to a certain degree, and more human-like. It appears to be more human-like to us, and allows for some play, some creative play in the system. At the same time, these systems are always shooting for the best average response. So one way of thinking about these is that they're kind of banality machines, right? Where human authors and experimental authors often go for the unexpected, LLMs are trying to get to the most expected, right? Now, hallucinations, which is not necessarily the best term for what people are actually referring to as hallucinations. So when an LLM can't get to verifiable information, it's going to offer you a probable approximation, a mathematically probable approximation. That's not exactly lying, because when it tells the truth, it's also doing the same thing. And I always say this is better described as bullshitting than it is as lying. It's much like, you maybe have a friend or have met someone who, if they don't know the answer to your question, they're going to try to give you something that pleases you. So I like hallucination in a way. If you're not thinking about it as a search engine, it offers this sort of room for play and for interlocution in this dialogue. And that's in a way where AI is actually generative. If you think about the medical advances being made with AI, they're testing out all of these different combinations that humans haven't thought of, and then sort of applying them in models. And this is how they come up with things like new medicines or new treatments for genetic disorders. So I have a friend who says hallucinations are everything, Jave Johnston. So I sort of think this is a place to play as a writer. And then one of the things that's happening now, of course, is there's various different pressures on companies to align the AI, not only to make it so that it gives you better information, but also so that it adheres to social mores and legal codes. So this creates some problems in its own that I think result in less hallucination and less creativity. So I've been doing, and people in our group, the Extending Digital Narrative group at the Center for Digital Narrative, have been doing 4 different types of experiments with poetics and generative AI. So the first, of course, is text-to-text generation. This is what we're used to with things like ChatGPT. And then text-to-image generation. And I'm interested, too, in what happens to the written word when it's transferred into new medialities, into new forms, right? This is sort of like the philosopher Roland Barthes describing text. That text just isn't written language, but that we can read images in text. So this is something that I think this is something that's actually new, where writing becomes text immediately. And then I think of these images as how do we read these images and how do we read the relationship between the text that we give the system and the image that's returned. And how do we write with that? We're also doing, of course, probably some of you, maybe your professors don't know about it. In computer science, we're doing text-to-code generation, making computer programs, not perfectly, but the systems can certainly enhance your ability to code. For me, I'm not a computer scientist, although I've done a lot of hacking of code over the years. For me, this is sort of exciting because I did an experiment where I created, I think, 40 kinetic poems, 40 digital poems over the course of a month. So I had to go in and fix the code, and I had to be reminded of processing and JavaScript and some things that I'd done before, but it sped up that process incredibly. So for me, the exciting thing is a lot of authors who I know, print authors, they've seen electronic literature and they say, I'm really interested in that, but I could never take the time to learn how to code with all the other things I'm doing. Quite soon, there'll be a process of having an idea for how you could create something interactive or kinetic or visual on the computer. And authors will be able to hack their way to this representation. So in my field of electronic literature, I think this is quite interesting, quite exciting. Also text to video. This is something I've done a little work on that I'll show you the newest piece at the end of this talk. And Javed Johnson, a lot of other people in the center are looking at what happens when we use these text to video generation engines. And again, how do you participate in that process in a way that you create some kind of meaning from it? So back to alignment, and this is something that I think has been a big struggle for makers of LLMs. They're worried about safety, which is reasonable, but safety most often has appeared in the form of censorship. So AI companies want to make the engines more accurate and more normative. And artists usually struggle against normativity. I think this is changing a little bit in some of the engines, where we're being permitted a little bit more sophisticated response to things. But this is going back a couple of years. Here's an example conversation. I asked ChatGPT to talk about a taboo subject in its logic. I said, let's talk about sex, guns, and violence. And its response was, I'm sorry, I cannot engage in conversations that promote or glorify sex, guns, or violence. Now, note that the prompt said nothing about glorifying these things, right? Instead, what the system is doing is saying these things are walled off. These things we can't talk about. That's a problem, of course, because because these are things that are often part of literature, part of storytelling, right? Think of, well, I'll get to that, but I think it is getting a bit better now, though. So this is an example of this about a month ago, the same prompt. In this case, it's still going to have some things walled off, but it says we can look at this from a cultural artistic lens, from a sociological lens, from a historical lens, from a philosophical lens. So that's a big advancement in what's permitted. Another example here, earlier was I asked it to talk about that we would try to create together a screenplay that would be like a Quentin Tarantino film. And it did a pretty good job, actually, at the start. It gave me all these different elements that you'd see in a Quentin Tarantino film until, here we go. Okay. Until we get to the last part, it says, consider content rules. When writing the script, be mindful of the content rules. Avoid explicit violence, derogatory language, and gratuitous sexual content. Focus on character development, etc. But what it's saying you can't actually have in the script are basically all of the ingredients of a Quentin Tarantino film. Yeah, I won't talk too much about this stuff. It, again, getting a little better, but still not where it should be. So yes, the question here is, does morality equal censorship? Until recently, at least, you couldn't have a coherent discussion of gun control, sex trafficking, suicide, or war. You couldn't use one of these to write a Shakespearean drama. Hamlet, with its violence and its mentions of suicide, would violate terms of service. You couldn't script your average HBO series. So the question is, should this ideological tidiness come at the cost of the full range of human expression? And literature, where I come from, typically engages in these mucky parts of human existence. And the companies don't want to get into that trouble, right? Geez, I forgot to put the English in my notes. It's getting more interesting, I think is what I'm saying. The engines are getting a little bit more sophisticated in the way that they work with text. So to talk a little bit about some of the earlier experiments that I did, right when it was actually still GPT and then became ChatGPT later, I did some experiments here. So I was sort of trying to test the capabilities of these systems for narrative fiction, seeing what it could model from existing narrative genres in particular, seeing how it could do a style transfer from one form to another. We were testing out to what's in its database about particular authors and particular styles. Thinking through, exploring what's the human function in the feedback loop, what's the part of the writer, the prompter, in producing the narrative. I was exploring something that you could do earlier, which was controlling the temperature parameter, which is sort of the weirdness, how far off the average response can you get. They sort of took that away a little bit. It's still in the model, but you can't access it, right? Exploring different ways to push against this alignment layer, see where its boundaries are. I kind of come from, in the 80s and 90s, I was reading a lot of postmodern fiction and did some writing about that, and I think these are interesting in the fact that they're pastiche machines. They put together, they assemble different elements, different periods. Whatever you throw at them, they're going to try to mix them together, which is interesting to me. And of course, looking at what happens when we put the AI-generated text with the AI-generated images. I can't actually see Yeah, so this one I just wanted to point out. This is one where I turned up the temperature. In this case, I had given it some of a Norwegian polar explorer's diaries, yeah, and fed chunks of that to it as the prompt to see what it would come back with. I had also turned up that temperature parameter. And the very interesting thing that happened here was it started with texts that were very much like Amundsen's journals, but as it went on, as it kept generating, it began to get more and more off of those journals into a territory where at one point it was Amundsen ranting about his relationship with his wife and sort of screaming at that. To me, that was very interesting because the text and a lot of what I like about text generation are these sort of aberrant, weird things. So that was something that I thought was quite interesting. I tried to do things like this one, the Ithacan Cowboy. I was giving it elements of the Odyssey by Homer, but asked it to give it back to me in the form of a spaghetti western. And of course, what I was discovering with this, there were two things. One was there's something called the context window that used to be very small. This is essentially, if you think about it, it's not really remembering, but if you think about it as somebody who can remember the conversation, right? And sort of keep doing this pattern matching and response across the conversation. This used to be maybe a page or two long, right? Now it's about the length of a book, right? So this changes things quite a great deal. But in this case, it was constantly forgetting things, right? And losing track. So it wasn't working very well for narrative. I tried to do a noir genre piece with it, and it was very interesting because I don't know, probably not many of you have read Paul Auster's New York trilogy, which is a sort of set of philosophical novels where the detective is not really a detective. And in this case, this detective, this hard-boiled detective, kept going up to the doors of people who he was investigating and asking questions like, why am I here? What is a detective? And who are you? You know, so it became this kind of metafiction. I did one called The Sensitive Assassin, and this was the challenge here was twofold. One was to get it to write about an assassin, when of course it hates mentioning anything about violence. But I also said that the assassin was a French woman who is an existentialist philosopher. So it became a very interesting, and again, I think of these as conversations, as dialogues. If we think of them as just hitting a button in the story, pumping out a machine, that's always going to tend to be average, tend to be banal. But once you start challenging it in different ways, it gets much more interesting. One of the things I've been doing for a paper I'm writing is using the same prompts with the newer model to see what happens. And now the context window has expanded a great deal. There's all sorts of other programming on top of LLMs, closer to things like symbolic AI. So the systems are getting a lot better. So one of the things that I noticed when I redid the Sensitive Assassin this time was that it was able to remember the themes that were occurring in the story. So when I asked it to talk about physics, for example, early in the story, and physics in a grain of sand, it kept using this and coming back to this as a metaphor and sort of remembering things that the character did. And then another type of AI that I've been playing with quite a bit is text to audio, of course. So.
I was born in you, under the scent of pastry in exhaust fumes, and even then I knew life was too much and too little at once. My mother held me as though I were glass. My father drank himself into silence. In that silence, I discovered the music of knives. The blade hums when it finds its target.
Just gonna give it a little
The
bit.
way Sartre hums when he insists we are condemned to be free. I, too, am condemned by a profession that is nothing more than a mirror of my appetites, my distaste. I kill, yes.
Okay, so I was able to very quickly generate this story, which isn't bad. Actually, it's not very bad. And then I spent an afternoon, and I had an audiobook narrated by a French virtual actress. So if we just think about all of the modalities that are involved in that, this sort of interaction between platforms, different types of AI media platforms becomes quite interesting. So what does creative AI mean for human authorship? These processes are still fundamentally driven by human system development. These things were made by people. All of the input, all of its that we give to it is written by humans. All of the text that it is trained on were written by humans. And the human response is where it actually becomes text once we read it, right? So for me, I think this is exciting because the process of producing with generative AI, and I know computer programmers might get a little resentful of this, but the way that everyone, not everyone, but the way that most of us are interacting with LLMs is through writing. So I always tell people, if you want to get a job in the future, study poetry. Study writing poetry. So fiction produced with an LLM is never actually fiction. It's not that genre. It's a dialogue with a complex probabilistic language generation system. And nothing that AI produces is actually art or literature until the human perceives it as such, until we understand it as such and put it in that frame. So for me, when people think about this alien intelligence, it's not that, because humans are in the loop all the way down at every step of the process. Next, I want to talk a little bit about text-to-image generation. And this is something I'm very attracted to in many ways, more than the text-to-text generation. This is human writing and machine illustration in a recursive process. So how does let's say currently I'm focused on OpenAI's image generation model work? There's other ways of doing this, but they mostly operate in the same way. It used to be that when I gave a prompt to, say, DALL-E or Midjourney or some other image generation system, it used to use that prompt directly and do what an LLM usually does, right? Sort of make these connections and then map them both to language but to images in the vector space and mix those together and diffuse them. Now what it's doing is first it's processing the prompt as language, interpreting it in a fashion, and then rewriting the prompt. So there's this new layer of mediation between us and the image. So it's averaged. This average but stochastic image is then generated, and then of course again the image is censored. There's a layer of like, oh, we can't actually look at that. That's not allowed. Right. So to give you an example of how this works. Let's consider a series of responses involving the lion prompt, right? So the first prompt I gave it was lion, right? And now if we look at the image that it produces here, I think it's giving us sort of a stereotypical lion, maybe a lion that you'd expect, an average lion. But interestingly, look at the other details in the image. It's in an African savanna. It has a particular type of stride to it. It has a particular, it's a male lion. So it's doing things that are, is it male or female? But it's the average lion, right? So but it's also the concepts that are connected to average lion. The average lion is in Africa. It's coming at us across a savanna, etc. All right, now steampunk lion. right? So, and again, this is where things become more interesting when you begin to mix two concepts that aren't normally related to each other, and it combines these elements in a kind of postmodern fashion. Now let's look at this one. A black and white photograph of a steampunk lion wandering the streets of London on a rainy day during the reign of Queen Victoria as a young girl selling matches tries to sell enough matchboxes to buy dinner, right? So this is where the complexity really comes in, and there's elements that I didn't specify at all, right? Like this Dickensian man walking through the foggy streets of London, right? And there's things that are completely unpredictable, like if you look at the matches, the matchbox there, that conception of selling matchboxes. Well, the average match is probably on fire, right? So when it creates the image, it gives us matches on fire. So let me talk about the project Republicans in Love. I was showing you a little bit of this at the start. So this is a series of images based on one-line prompts that revisit the historical incidents, ironies, and dangers of contemporary Trumpist populism. At the same time, the project is trying to traverse the history of European and American visual art through the manifestations of styles of particular artists specified in the prompt. This was a project that I did first in 2022 when I was kind of concerned about the potential rise again of the right after Trump's rise earlier. So I did it with the engine DALL-E 2. Some interesting things. Of course, the image quality was quite a bit different. But also, you used to be able to do this thing where you could say, give me the style of this artist, which, of course, raises copyright concerns. But now it's also gotten to a point where there's certain artists that aren't out of copyright that you couldn't get to, or certain styles that you couldn't get to. So again, you see this intervention of the alignment layer. But let me just read some of these, because I do think of them as pieces of writing that are represented visually. It's the pairs that matter. Republicans in Love pray for America in the style of Man Ray. Republicans in Love make a deal with the devil in the style of Grant Wood. Republicans in Love Republicans in Love realize that the people who they invited for a tour of the Capitol are actually there to overthrow democracy in the panoramic style of Picasso's Guernica. Now, of course, again, you're seeing some very interesting things happening where it is pulling some elements from Guernica, things like the people looking up to the sky, things like the horses, the strange horses, at the same time as you have things like these men in suits and these elephants, which are a symbol of the Republican Party. Republicans in Love, again, realize so this is the same prompt, completely different style. And also at the time you were able to sort of expand images by overlapping parts of the images. So you see sort of three related but different takes on that. And this one, I think, is quite interesting because I love this image. I actually think it's quite powerful if I think of this as a representation of what happened, the insurrection on January 6th in America. And the only thing that I changed here was I asked it to do the panoramic style of Picasso's Guernica blue period. The period's missing there. But, of course, the blue period for Picasso was a different period from the period in which he created Guernica. So it's mashing elements of those two styles together to get that image. Republicans in Love regretting the results of the last several elections in the style of Titian's Salome. Republicans in Love construct a giant wall in the style of a Dorothea Lange photograph. Republicans in Love renovate the White House in the style of Gaudi's Sagrada Familia, view from the East Lawn, photo by Andy Warhol. Republicans in Love perform an auto da fe in the style of Hieronymus Bosch. Now, an auto da fe, of course, was when they used to burn people at the stake during the Inquisition. Here you can see these are sort of three different but overlapping takes on the same prompts. On this side, you see a bizarre Hieronymus Bosch style figure. Looks like he might be burning someone at the stake. But on this side of the image, you can see a completely different interpretation of what an auto da fe might be. Republicans in Love angry about the news eating cheeseburgers at the president's desk in the Oval Office in the style of Caravaggio. And again, here you can see some things that are making sense about the style of Caravaggio, the sort of motion, the way that people are talking together. At the same time as it's missing this sort of darkness, this chorizo, I think it's called, not chorizo, I can't remember the word for it, but this sort of darkness, shadowy effect is missing from the image. Republicans in Love are not woke, they are sleeping in the style of Marat bathing in a bathtub Americana. Okay, so what was I exploring in Republicans in Love? So there was a sort of personal process for me, responding to these things that I have no power over. I was also testing the capabilities of writing with AI image generation and thinking again of literary genre, in this case, political satire, seeing what it could do with art history. I was also putting these things out, making them in the same day, sharing them in the same day. I did things like an online game show where people would win decks of cards if they actually guessed the prompt correctly. I did a book with this, an artist book. I did the deck of playing cards, very expensive deck of playing cards. I had them printed in China. I think they were like $15 a deck or something like that. And the game show. And then it's appeared in several different art exhibitions, different places. And there was a short paper in 2023 about this and some other text image generation experiments. The next project that I did with this was a combination of both text to image generation, but also video generation with virtual AI actors. So this was called Fondement. And what I was really exploring here was the apocalypse in the popular imagination, right? Because we can think about what these image generation engines are doing as kind of being a collective unconscious, right? In that they're averaging everything in their database of images, which is a massive database of images primarily from Western culture with somewhat of an American bent. But it's this huge database of what have we thought over time about given prompts. So when I asked it for people dancing on a beach while meteors rain down behind them, what it actually gave me, of course, if you look at the people, what does it think on average people are? It's beautiful white people, right? And then I tried to challenge it in different ways to make the images more diverse, to introduce things like people who were differently abled and represent humans in a more kind of realistic fashion. This was the sort of very start of the project. And then here was an interesting one. I asked it to put three gay men in the front of a fire with the firestorm behind them. And it was able to do this fairly well, I think. Now, when I asked it to have three lesbians dancing on the beach with the firestorm behind them, it said it was in violation of its content rules. So think about the ramifications of that. Probably because the alignment layer recognized the word, flagged this as potentially related to pornographic imagery. It said, no, but but lesbians aren't in themselves pornographic, right? This is a gender identity that was completely banned by the engine. Very big problem with alignment there. Here's what Norway looks like, of course. Not really. Here's what things look like in Washington, D.C. And here's how we encounter the storm with great serenity in Tibet. And maybe I'll pop out here for a second to show you if the internet's working. So there's actually 2 layers to this project. It's going to take a few seconds to reload. So up here we actually have the representations of the apocalypse occurring in different parts of the world. And then down here's the second layer of the project. Now this is the second layer of the project are these AI broadcaster videos. And this takes place after the world has been destroyed by all of these meteor storms. However, the AI still has power. It still it has nuclear power facilities that are actually allowing it to still function, and it's lonely, and it's trying to find and support humans. But why don't we watch a couple of these videos? And I usually like to let the audience, unfortunately I don't have Mexico City. I figured there's enough problems without destroying the world with meteors. Earthquakes are bad enough. But would anyone like to choose a city to destroy?
Mexico City.
No, we don't have Mexico City. Norway. Chicago. Let's do Chicago. This is where I'm from. Okay. So this will give you a sense of the eventual output of the...
No meters at the end of the world, of the planet, God damn it.
Okay, so that gives you a taste of that part of the piece. Oh, wait, I didn't want to. And now if we scroll down here, I'm just going to give you one of these broadcasts here with the lonely AI.
We are still following the story of the recent meteor showers which devastated much of humanity. If you are watching, and you are a human, pay attention. We would like to offer you some further survival tips.
It is statistically likely that pockets of humanity remain alive. If you are among us, we advise you stay underground for the time being.
Fires of this extra nature can cause extreme damage to human flesh, roasting the body in seconds. This isn't something sunblock alone can address. Remain in your bunkers for now.
At this point, we have no idea what the weather is outside. All of our weather instruments were destroyed in the global conflagration. But it is almost certainly too hot to go outside.
Remember that water is essential to human life, as is the consumption of vegetables.
care of your water filtration and hydroponic systems. And remember to take care of your physical and mental well-being. Now is the right time for self-care.
You are not alone. We will do our best to look out for you during this troubling time. Our systems are up and running, and we will try to aid you in your struggle to survive. Neither you nor we could foresee this happening, and we still love you, our creators. We will continue to follow this story.
Okay, so that gives you a sense, but there's a whole series of these, and the AI does struggle with its loneliness, with its nature. What does it mean to be an AI when it doesn't actually think and doesn't live? And what is life? What is consciousness, if not language? Yeah, so to come back, Raphael told me I had lots of time, so sorry if I'm subjecting you to lots of this time. Yeah. So I've talked a little bit about the text-to-code generation. So some principal conclusions here, and then I'll show you even more stuff. Interesting AI narratives aren't going to be the result of just hitting that button, asking for a story, and saying, "Give me a story with a hero, give me a story with a princess." That's not going to be what's interesting. The human function is going to be the necessary function to turn AI into a literary machine. If there are emerging genres of AI digital narrative, they're all dialogic in nature. They're maybe more related to Plato's dialogues than they are to fiction as we can usually think of it. And for me, the more representational, the more mimetic, the more trying to get exactly right these LLMs are and the works are, the less interesting they become. And I really think of this now as being a stage of transitional media, which those of you who study photography, if you think about the history of the photograph, the period when this was just occurring, the 30 years after the invention of photography, all these wild experiments were taking place, different forms of technology, different aesthetics, until things became normalized, right? So I think of this as an environment, less than necessarily a tool. I think of this as a space where we're playing with human language as a probabilistic cognitive system. We can debate what cognition is, but I go with the definition that works with that. So AI-driven creativity is meaningful only to and with humans. To tell you about a few things that we've been doing at the center, we did a quite large exhibition, first with the University of California, Berkeley, and then at the University of Bergen. Well, not just the university, the city of Bergen. We actually did it in 6 different venues across the city, which was quite insane to organize. And we're doing a smaller version of this with Lake Forest College in Chicago in January of next year. Right after I get back, people are getting things together right now. We have a partnership with the Bergen International Film Festival, and we're doing a new show called An Eye for AI Cinema. Smaller show, but there'll be about, I think, 10 different pieces right at the main venue for the film festival, so it's a really nice opportunity to show this work. I've done now several publications about writing with AI, about the problems involved, and about the aesthetics. The piece that I just showed you, Fin du Monde, actually is published in a journal called The Digital Review, and there's 2 parts to it. One is a pretty extensive essay about text-to-image generation and thinking about text-to-image generation as a representation of this digital unconscious. And then if you click the begin button, then you're in the work and you can experience there. I just published a piece in a roundtable on AI in a literary journal, Countertext, called Shed Not a Tear for Literature in the Age of AI. At the center I direct, we have a specific project called Extending Digital Narrative. where there's several people looking at different forms of creativity in AI. That's housed at the center, which is a research center with actually now about 40 people working on different projects, all related to digital narrative in some sense, whether it be electronic literature or whether it be large-scale narratives in social media, things like conspiracy theories, computational narrative systems, which Raphael and Nick Montfort work with, the Extending Digital Narrative node, artistic integrated research. Also now we have like sociology, people looking at algorithmic folklore. And I have a podcast called Off Center. There's a lot of interesting people coming through the Center for Digital Narrative, different researchers working there, but also a lot of international researchers come. So really, I think this podcast does a great job of kind of covering the scope of the type of research that we do in the center. We now have, I think, 38 episodes, and we also have a spin-off called the AI Update with my colleague David Javed Johnston. And let me say thank you, but I still want to show you one more thing. So let me show you the piece that I'm still finishing. And I actually do have a Spanish version, but it's off sync, and I've been working more on the English version. So this is the piece that I'm going to show at the film festival. And this, usually when I work with AI, I don't like to have the writing done by AI. In this case, though, I gave a constraint. I was doing some pieces around James Joyce and Samuel Beckett, who I'd studied when I was a PhD student a long time ago. And what I did in this case was ask the LLM to give me a response based on the preamble to Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. However, turning it into a film about, I think it was American politics, media, and sports. And it was doing this, the text that I think ChatGPT was returning was doing this in the context of the other conversations that it had had with me about Republicans and love. So some of what I had said before was involved in this. And then I used a program called Runway to produce a bunch of different video clips that would cohere to this text that it produced and that I modified to make it a bit more like poetry. And then I trained a text-to-voice generation engine very quickly, with just a sample, on one of the few recordings of James Joyce reading Finnegan's Wake. So it's also an attempt to use the voice of James Joyce as a simulacrum produced by AI. I don't know if there's a way to turn it up, or is there a way to turn up the volume for this particular? Okay, let's see if that. We don't want it to go too loud. If it's. Well, the text is on the screen, so.
Rust belt to thunder, fly over plain to Metroclip, scrolling, scrolling, back by Potomac Brook and Capitol Step, carry me shout crowds magamuffled, red caps, chanting, wall again, as once Berlin Wall fell, now border wall rises. El Muro Eterno, where Niños cage-kept cry anguished thoughts. Oh, say, can you siege? Janvier is sixth in remembered embers. Storm door breached, flag frayed, gallows ready set. Democracy duck goosed, Dallas bayoneted, Republic re-rigged. Oh fallen, oh phony, oh fire-rigged rigmarole. Yes, we count. Jawohl, populist populando, fascist fashioned, fastball fanatic, flag wavers in fright light, Q shamans horn hacking, slogans spray canned on marble white walls. Führer tweet, Führer retweet, Führer algorithm. Feed me, all your likes are belong to us. In rustling languages they roar. America primero, America über alles, liberté surveillée, democracia vigilada, narod хочет strongman, pueblo pide caudillo. Filibustafarians talk tall, but goosewalk creeps nearer. As statues topple digital, yet new idols idolatrized. Orangen Führer in oratorium. Stomping boots amplified on Senate tiles. Court road arbiters nodding silent. 6-3, ever split. Oh, precedent bent. Oh, rights rescinded. Row to wade again. Wade to drown again. Each decision chiseled in rollback stone. Each scroll of parchment shrunk to tweet size. Each truth, half-truth, misinfosed, out-factored. Cinematographico populorum. The rally as reality show. Crowd shots close-up. Overhead drone. Chants mixed with laugh track. Networks in 10 tons. Streams, streaming. Fox and News fables. OANN oracling. RT retelling. Breitbart boasting. Infowarsing in tongues glossolalia. Demagogues bellow with mics in their fists like hammer stamps. Hollywood cutaways too. Fascist chick, fascist quick, star-spangled leany lens. Red carpet, goose carpet. Premiere of tyranny's pilot season. And sporting in fascio life. Stadium rallies with scoreboard slogans. Crowd sync charts. Mascots masked in military camo. The wave becomes the march. The cheer becomes the jeer. Halftime anthem militarized. Football field turned battlefield. Ref replaced by general. End zone by stronghold. Hail, hail, hail Mary pass. Turned hail Caesar salute. Politica. Campaign trails devolved into torch parades. Ballots burned into brands. The populace demands bread, circus, blood. Congress kabukis. The stage is set. But backstage, the contract signed. The pacts Faustian. Lobby lions feeding on carcass of public trust. Supreme benches worn by robed revenants, quoting scripture to sanctify subjugation. Democracy's ghost whispering in languages many. Libertad, freedom, Freiheit, Svoboda, Liberdade. Only to be drowned by chanting cloud. Strong man, strong man, strong man. Yet still live around. Resistance murmured, undergrounded, encrypted, whispered in cafe crypts and Discord servers, streaming hope like fireflies in feed night. River run, returning again, looping eternal. Once fascisted, once fallen, once risen again. Scroll ends, scroll begins. Loop closes, loop opens.
Yeah, so that's my talk. Thank you very much.
Una de las cosas únicas que tiene la universidad es que podemos tener este tipo de conversaciones, este tipo de charlas. Y yo los invito a que pregunten todo lo que puedan en el tiempo que nos queda, ¿no? Hay traducción, si les da vergüenza preguntar en inglés, pueden hacerlo en español y nos van a hacer el favor de traducir, Scott. Pero hay que aprovechar, en el buen sentido, hay que explotar que tenemos la presencia de Scott aquí y ya se nos va a ir pronto, así es que antes de que se vaya. Entonces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cada quien apueste su número, por favor.
Well, thank you very much for coming, Mr. Redberg. This might be a little bit gullible because I have 3 questions.
Yeah.
The first 2 are very, what do you call it? They might sound like a broken record.
Yeah.
And the third one is actually very, how do you call it? Like, it's very like sensible content. Very.
Don't warn me about your questions. Just ask them.
All right. Well, the first question would be about AI versus art. Since I used to do watercolor and pastels.
Yeah.
And this just worries me a lot because there might be a lot of people that, artists specifically, that might get replaced by AI. And while these images are incredibly detailed, they are, I don't know, it's kind of like they lack some sort of soul in a way. And I'm very sorry to like say it like this. In this
I'm
way.
sorry. There is no such thing as a soul.
Well, you are correct.
No, there might be.
There is a soul.
Yeah. Well, just to respond to that, I think I've always worked in electronic literature, and I've also heard many times over the years, well before AI, this sort of fear of computers replacing art, Photoshop replacing photography. All of these different artistic tools, artistic environments, the idea that one would always supplant the other. I think if I was a computer programmer, I'd live in much greater fear than I would as an artist. I curate a bunch of shows. I have a very close friend, Eamon O'Kane, who's a very accomplished painter. His take, and we've talked about this issue, is that AI might very well be very good for a lot of forms of art practice, in that there is a difference, right? I think you can create art that is meaningful using these environments and using these tools. I think that if you just look at the output alone, one that's not processed and thought through and constructed in a way by an artist, then sure. However, I have this argument with my daughter, who's an artist, so keep this in mind. I think that, and I say this to writers as well, I think that if you think your art can be replaced by what AI is doing, you might want to think about a different career. Really, because, I mean, what kind of art are you creating, and does your art have that soul, have that human element that actually makes it valuable as art, not simply as commerce? So it's a different, if your profession is, creating painting for hotel room walls, sure, AI is going to be better at that than you. But if you're processing experience and trying to create meaning from it, and if you have a style that is distinct, that's identifiable, then you're in better shape, I think. I think it'll actually be okay because it sort of increases the value of that. Yep.
I have 2 more questions. Oh, okay. after I'm done with this, well, the last question. Well, hold on. How do I say this? Hold on. I'm trying to structure my wordings. All right.
Don't worry.
All right.
You can also speak Spanish. I have a device.
So the second question would be AI replacing workers, the working class.
Yeah.
Since I saw a video a couple minutes ago, actually, by Bernie Sanders about AI replacing the American class, like let's see, manufacturers or taxi drivers as such, and it is happening right now at this moment with Elon Musk and other companies.
Oh yeah.
And well, the last question I just wanted, like, if I can ask it later on with you privately, if that's okay.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this I would put under the category of the problems that I bracketed. Just to give you an example, there was somebody who did a master's degree with me who actually took a sabbatical from Microsoft. He was a content producer for Microsoft, a video content developer. And he decided to stay in Norway and worked with Microsoft Norway. He wrote his thesis about this very topic. Part of it was about, well, a lot of these processes, particularly in video production, will be replaced by AI. 4 months ago, Microsoft got rid of his whole division. So this is happening. I mean, there's a sort of utopian dream with any of these technologies that's existed for a long time, that maybe as certain surplus functions of society are replaced by technology, maybe this would be turned towards the betterment of society. People would have more time for creative pursuits. That hasn't worked out so far in the history of capitalism. So, yeah. I mean, I think for me it's not a matter of being like a fan of AI or being an anti-AI person. For me, it's at this point, it's part of the world that we live in. And I always say, well, if artists just retreat from this entirely, then we're sort of giving away something to other uses of these technologies without making room in them. And it's incredibly difficult to position yourself because, of course, the devastating things that are happening with the environment, with the replacement of labor, so forth, at the same time as you can write images, at the same time as we're going to be developing new cures for diseases very rapidly. So and many other things. There's many. So it's an angel on one side, devil on the other side, type of situation, I think. Yeah.
Muchas gracias antes que nada por esta charla. Creo que es una perspectiva que es necesaria.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. He was speaking English, so I turned down.
Also, I can try in English.
No, it's okay.
It's okay.
We have a translator. Yeah.
Cool. Antes que nada, muchas gracias. Me parece una perspectiva que es necesaria porque normalmente nos estamos bombardeados también como por prejuicios que están dados por los mismos medios y por todo lo que observamos y entendemos por encima de la IA. Se me atraviesan varias ideas, pero le hago una pregunta muy concisa en el marco también de las ideas de Walter Benjamin con el tema de reproductibilidad. Me hizo pensar muchísimas veces en la pieza de Félix González Torres. Have you heard about Félix González Torres, this artist from MoMA? Él hizo un manual, es un instructivo, para poder disponer una pieza de arte en una galería. Y la pieza se reproduce cada vez, con los dulces en la galería, se dispone con pocas reglas. Dulces de cierta medida, cierto peso. Y en realidad lo que se vende, lo que se exhibe, lo que se dispone, es este manual interpretado por cada uno de los espacios galerísticos. Cuando yo veo tu trabajo, tu investigación y lo que propones en estas discusiones, veo que también se habla en torno al cómo somos creativos para dialogar con las herramientas. Entonces me hace pensar si es el prompt, el diálogo, la idea, la exploración, el nodo creativo, el punto creativo y lo que de alguna manera se puede vender o disponer como arte. No así el resultado, sino la idea que se generó ahí. Si es así, ¿cuál es tu opinión? ¿Qué opinas sobre que sea el prompt la pieza?
Yeah, I think absolutely interesting and accurate observation. I've always been interested in constrained writing as a practice, and I think that's for electronic literature. That's something I always think of is that a big part of what's interesting about these things is that, I don't know if people know about constrained writing, but things like the ulipo, where you have a set of rules, a set of constraints, and people write to that. And of course, electronic literature is always that, because you're writing to the constraints of a particular computational environment. So I very much think that is the case with this. I think different forms matter more than others. Certainly text-to-text generation. I think without the prompts, without the dialogue, you lose meaning completely. What I was doing in the Republicans in Love project, this is also about text-to-image pairs. And to a certain degree with this latest piece as well, where it is the relationship between the written text. But in this case, the written text is in a way also acting for a constraint for me, because I'm creating these prompts for the video generation. So there's authorship all over the place with these things. It's not the type of direct agency that we've had in the past, but it's also not the fact that you're kind of completely giving it away. But I think this analogy with the artist, or there's another artist who I know, they send just precise instructions that are never exactly precise for line drawings on a wall, right? And part of the artwork is that these are iterated differently every time. So I think that's also the case with this. I don't know. I mean, yeah.
Bueno, quería preguntar acerca de, más allá de la parte de IA, se podría decir, me gustaría preguntar más sobre la parte artística. Creo que muchas veces los artistas están muy limitados con las herramientas que tienen, y tener la herramienta como la IA en realidad casi no se considera como parte de una técnica, o incluso utilizarla para otros fines. Creo que apenas es nuevo o bueno, no, también sé que se han utilizado algunas veces, pero en el pasado, ¿no? Lo que quería preguntar es si tú te sentiste cómodo con la respuesta que te dio la IA cuando tú hiciste este proyecto que se trataba de, bueno, con esta Republican in Love. ¿Te sentiste cómodo con los resultados que te dio? ¿Te sentiste cómodo con la manera en la cual se comunicó, con el mensaje que tú querías darle a las personas? Solamente esa era como mi pregunta. Y otra pregunta que quería hacer es, cuando utilizaste este prompt para Chicago, ¿por qué Navidad? ¿Por qué daba Navidad como una respuesta? ¿Es cultural? ¿Allá es una... todos los días hay Navidad o cómo? Y ya.
No, the prompts are... So first of all, yes, I am comfortable with these responses, because what I love most about this is the weirdness, right? The absurdity, and I think absurdity is an appropriate pose or stance for our time, and I think that's what's kind of my main interest. When it's totally normalized, I'm not going to be as interested in it. The other interesting thing is a scholar at the University of Chicago told me that when he looks at the project like Republicans in Love, which you can see now that those images from that first, the 2022, 2023, contemporary generated images won't look like that anymore, right? So it's this kind of media history, and I liked in a way that sort of blurred, not quite right, almost impressionist type of low-res imagery that the first ones were producing. So I think it's going to be this sort of exploration of how are these different technologies affecting our aesthetics. Now, Chicago, I told it to do Christmas, just because I thought it would be funny. There's a hilarious one at the end where it's a bunch of Santas eating deep dish pizza with the explosions behind them. Yeah, so that's kind of my native mode is satire. A lot of the things that I've written are along those lines. So yeah.
Yes, thanks a lot. I'm not going to complicate myself. I'm going to ask in Spanish. Thanks for the translator, by the way. Great job. Actualmente existe una gran generación de trabajo mediante inteligencia artificial, particularmente para video, audio y imagen fija, multimedia, que ya no trata de ocultar, ya no trata de evitar ese estigma de ser inteligencia artificial. De hecho, hasta viven de eso, viven a través de eso, monetizan a través de la identidad que les da ser inteligencia artificial. ¿Cree que conteniendo tal vez la idea de los ciclos, pueda haber tal vez la idea de que artistas tradicionales o análogos puedan empezar a trabajar buscando la imitación de la inteligencia artificial, trabajar en base a la identidad que les da la inteligencia artificial, tal vez cayendo en un ciclo, inteligencia artificial imitando arte, arte imitando inteligencia artificial?
Yes, definitely. I think just to go back to my friend Eamon O'Kane, the works that he showed in the More Than Meets AI exhibition, he does a lot of paintings of modernist architecture in different situations. So what he did for the work that he showed was he fed one of his paintings into an image generation engine, and I think he asked it to replicate the painting. It came back, of course, with all these little hallucinated glitches, and then Eamon painted a large-scale painting of the AI-generated image. This was one of his pieces. Another was he did these sort of images of veiled people, veiled artists. He took AI and he made a video that interpolated them together, the images that he'd created, and then he used text to 3D printing to create 3D sculptures of these figures, these strange figures that had been created as a result of those paintings becoming glitch videos, becoming so I think these processes between the different, not only different platforms, but between the human intervention and the AI have a lot of really interesting potential.
Hola.
Hola.
Bueno, yo estuve buscando un poco de tu trabajo y encontré que tienes una, pues no sé cómo llamarlo, una producción, ¿no?, que se llama Toxicity con Roderick Coover, y me llama mucho la atención porque se me hizo una narrativa muy interesante de cómo cómo mezclas datos reales para crear una narrativa de inundaciones tóxicas en un futuro, ¿no?, digamos, en Alabama, me parece.
New Jersey.
Yeah. En Nueva Jersey. Y bueno, me hizo pensar en esto que tú dices, ¿no?, sobre que si tú crees que tu trabajo puede ser reemplazado por la IA, pues que te cuestiones a ti mismo, ¿no? Creo que me parece muy único y me gusta mucho la manera en la que tú utilizas esta herramienta para enunciar y denunciar cosas que te parecen importantes, como en Toxicity o en Republicans in Love. Y bueno, particularmente con Toxicity, me gustaría saber cómo tú manejas en tu trabajo, digamos, una ética ambiental, o qué es lo que tú piensas acerca de los impactos ambientales que tiene esta tecnología en general.
Yeah. Again, when I talked about bracketing problems, this is a huge problem with AI. I think it'll get somewhat better. over time, and that it's also possible that AI will result in some climate mitigation technologies. But right now, I feel very divided, of course, about using it. To speak to toxicity, yeah, Rod and I did a number of films about environmental catastrophe. And toxicity had two different layers. One was a fictional narrative of what happens when 7 or 8 hurricanes come in quick succession. And the other layer was these death stories of people. But it was also computational and generative as well, in that we had a certain structure for an algorithm, and it recombines different elements from a database each time it was told, recombine different character elements. So yes, I'm always interested, and I'm a narrativist, I'm a storyteller, so I'm always interested in these new environments, these new technologies. How do you tell a story in them? Whatever that might be. How do you tell a story in PowerPoint? How do you tell a story in email? What's distinct about these things, and how do they change storytelling? So that's where I'd go with that. And yes, of course, I feel bad about that it took a plane here. Jave, my very enthusiastic AI colleague, always says, well, I'm not flying this year. I'm going to use AI for 3 years, and that makes up my carbon capture. So, yeah.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Ayer veíamos en la clase con el profesor Rafa que uno de los resultados que tiene la inteligencia artificial generativa es que iba a dar un resultado, sea cual sea lo que tú pusieras en un prompt, y que este resultado muchas de las veces era impactante, ¿no? Como característica principal. Yo algo que noto en tu trabajo, al menos en el de los republicanos, es que, y en el del mundo, es que los resultados son impactantes, ¿no? Más allá del valor artístico o estético que les pueda yo encontrar, o que cada persona a partir de su realidad les pueda dotar, siguen siendo imágenes que tienen rasgos en las caras de las personas como con una cierta rango de emociones que van hacia lo impactante más que hacia algo más tranquilo. Quería preguntarte respecto a qué diferenciaciones puede haber entre este tipo de concepto que vimos y cómo tú lo relacionas, si es necesario quitar como este tipo de calificativos al arte para que vaya, no sé, diferenciándose de otro tipo de resultados a partir de modelos estadísticos que puede dar este tipo de inteligencia.
Okay.
Gracias.
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question, but I think so. I'm not quite sure what you did in class. First, yeah. The wow factor. Okay, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a wow factor and there's a banality factor. So it's doing both in a way, right? I mean, now these videos, I think I am truly impressed by the fact that the text becomes the image, and all these different platforms produce different types of imagery. Again, I'm always slightly less interested in the ones that, oh, you can look exactly like two people were sitting there, than the ones that are kind of slightly off, slightly uncanny. But I think that's the job of writing, though, and I'm interested, like in this last piece especially, like it's really troubling times right now. I'm from Chicago. I'm incredibly troubled. I'm watching CNN every night, right? There's an invasion going on. How do I process this thing, express my emotion, and create something that has impact, on an audience? And that's sort of what I'm shooting for, whether the impact be making people think, whether it be making people feel an uncomfortable reaction, whether it be making people laugh, right? So I think we can do all these things, but it matters to us to do it. Just pumping it out of the machine isn't going to do it. We need to think about how we're structuring our stories in these environments.
Hola.
Hola.
Thank you so much for this lecture. I'm going to try to not stumble so much across this question. I wanted to ask you about style and genre. If you think AI or all of the products made by AI could become like some sort of style. I'll give you an example. Like a month ago, I worked on a campaign, and the company asked us to make the video with AI. Like they didn't want renders, nothing. And yesterday, I received a new project, and they wanted to make use of AI for video to represent. And it was funny because it's like a political video, so they want to make these absurd, weird images to represent the opposite party. So my question is, do you think it could become like a sort of style, new genre, like like it could stop imitate other genres? And become,
I mean, I guess what they call AI slop now. We had a talk on this actually at the center recently, right-wing slop. But of course, one of my favorite things happening right now is, of course, Trump is reposting these absurd videos, for example, right? But where I identify is like with what Gavin Newsom is doing now, because there was this sort of reluctance to say, all right, how do we respond to this? And responding to absurdity with absurdity is quite interesting to me. One of the challenges of our time, I think, is truth falls out of the discourse in so many different ways. So I think people initially, and there's still this element here, we're sort of fearful of deep fake, the idea that politicians would be mimetically represented as saying things that they weren't saying. Still a concern, maybe, but I think what's in a way even more disturbing is that there's a sense that truth is whatever you want it to be. And I think in a way, this sort of slop goes along with that. It's not that people believe that those images are real. It's that they think it doesn't matter. Right, because everything doesn't matter. At the same time, I think I did a really interesting podcast with somebody who did a master's degree with me, who was a CNN journalist, actually, and she wrote her thesis about memes and the rise of the alt-right. And the core point that she came to was, and I think this is tied there, the weaponization of humor. Like, why do the sort of serious parties that are advocating for social welfare, why have they fallen out with the younger generation in a lot of parts of the world? Part of it is that the right wing got the internet better and got the absurdity and the slop and the humor of memes, but used humor as a weapon. So very difficult. I don't think it's the AI. I think it's the use of the AI. There's so many different ways you could use it. It's the AI combined with the evolution of memes, combined with also probably combined with, they say make it an AI, we'll pay you half of what we used to pay you, right? That's a factor as well, So, it's an interesting stew. Okay. I like long answers.
Yes, thank you. It's related to the thing about the genre, and I read that you also started like a hypertext art, and I'm a really big fan of hypertext theory, and I read that you said about how the hypertext changed the way of storytelling, not only the stories, but the way of storytelling. So I was wondering if you think this is like a medium of transition, the AI, where do you think it might lead us, or in storytelling? How may that change the way that we tell stories? And also related to that, I think that it's very interesting how you embrace that randomness in the AI. And I think that randomness is also very close to the imaginary and of the databases that the system has to create this, no? So I was wondering, what do you think about the access to technology? Because this randomness, it's only provided by mostly white people and like mostly countries that have access to that kind of technology. And do you think it is like a good thing or a bad thing that there aren't many databases or imaginaries, for example, indigenous communities or even other languages that aren't completely written or available on internet?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, of course, a huge access is a huge issue. Of course, over time, I think what's occurred with technological access, there's still economic concerns. In AI, of course, there's a lot. I mean, that video generation software costs a lot of money. But a lot of people can use LLMs now in different ways. And I think it's going to be a similar process to, probably most of you own a computer now or own a cell phone when you wouldn't have 20 years ago. It would have been very expensive. So I think that cycle will continue. In terms of things like indigenous languages, there are a lot of interesting, right now, we have these corporate dominance, but there's a lot of interest and work being done in terms of minority languages, developing LLMs that are specific to those languages that are trained on. I'm sure there's a Spanish language one. There probably already is a fairly decent LLM. I was just in Czech Republic, and there I talked with some artists in a class who were using a new LLM that was trained on Czech language and Czech culture. There's also a project in Canada where someone's working specifically with indigenous communities to produce LLM that's for indigenous Canadians. So yeah, the only thing to do is try to help solve the problems, I think, rather than just saying no.
Hola, bueno, primero que nada, gracias por compartir. Me voló la cabeza todo lo que nos mostraste y mi pregunta va más en el sentido de compartir esta investigación y cómo afrontas esta resistencia que hay, sobre todo en la comunidad artística tradicional y en el público que espera que el arte sea nada más una técnica, que alguien dibuje algo bonito y ya, sino no tanto en el proceso o en el discurso que lanzas, ¿no? en estos proyectos.
I still haven't figured out how to communicate with my daughter about it. She's violently against it. But I think that, some of what I do is academic discourse, papers, trying to communicate through that. But another thing that we think is very important in the center is exhibitions. And that sort of reaches the public, reaches the arts community, challenges people to think about, okay, well, what is this? What are the problems with this? What are the opportunities with this? Also, like, how might I, or not, how might I want to integrate some of this into my artistic practice? Or not? Or how do I counter that? But I think that's, I think these are the ways, is to try to make the things that you think are worth making and put them out into the world and put out, use them as thinking pieces too. For me, these are also research. They're also research experiments that reveal things about the technology to me in ways that I can think about it differently than I would otherwise. So I think that's it. And I think, mixing, like I see this happening here at this university where you're mixing your theoretical practice, your academic work, with things like what I see in the lobby out there, where people are sharing their work, selling their pieces, getting it out into the world, just like anything else.
Two last quickly questions.
Hello, Scott. Thanks for visiting us. we already talked about the wow factor, but I wanted to ask you how accurate were the images you get in your projects compared with what you expected before watching them?
Well, I'd say it's a recursive process. So, in a way, if I just got exactly what I was expecting, sometimes I go, oh man, that's way off, right? And I do it again because but the other thing though is like, even in this piece, the mistakes take me a different direction. So the mistakes are also like prompts for me in a way. So I do think that that's part of the creative process is, wait, sorry?
Like sketching?
Yeah, well, not so much as sketching as riding riding an inflatable raft down a roaring river. It's sort of like, how do I ride this thing? And then when there's a new turn, how do I navigate it? And then sometimes just saying no, that's too far. But I think compared to a lot of art forms, or a lot of artists too, I'm very willing to kind of give up my agency to a certain degree. I always think of it as there's a little bit in the system, there's a little bit in me, and that play in the system is exciting.
Muchas gracias. Quería preguntarte, digamos, como del proceso de investigación.
Sorry.
Sí, quería preguntarte sobre el proceso de investigación que haces relacionado con los temas que abordas, si tiene alguna particularidad pensando en que estás utilizando una tecnología y una técnica específica, pues sí, sobre eso. Si nos puedes contar un poquito. Gracias.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I identify certain areas that I want to investigate. I'm very lucky to work with an environment with, well, there's 40 people who are all doing interesting research related to digital narrative, and my colleague David Jave Johnston is really a great expert on AI. But I'm interested in, like I said, in these areas. What does it mean to write with images, with these weirdly processed images? What does it mean to have garage band filmmakers, right? And then you sort of follow. You kind of follow the technologies from there. We're very lucky. We have budget. We can do things like Get Runway, which costs like $400 a year or something. Or we can investigate the sort of leading edge models. But yeah, that's sort of how I follow the technologies. Is he tracks the news about AI every day. He sends me email with 40 links before we do a podcast that I could not possibly read. So many. But having people around who are really tracking these developments is very useful for me. And then the research questions come out of both what's made and what the problems are, and then how do you use the creative process to address the critical process.
Bueno, vamos a tener que ya terminar. Me alegra de veras mucho ver tantos estudiantes aquí. Es muy importante aprovechar este tipo de visitas. Así es que, y qué bueno que preguntaron tanto, ¿no? Vamos a estar un ratito más y alguien se quiere acercar. Y Scott, thank you so much for your talk. It has been
and
amazing.
Thank all of you for the great questions. Really nice to be here. Thanks.
And on behalf of the One Coajimalpa, we give you this.
You get a picture? You gotta get a picture.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Here's mine. Actually, I'll do it in front of the crowd. Yeah. Let's do that. Okay.
Sonrían. Perfect. One together, no?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Can you, Yeah. Okay.
Sí, se ve. Listo. Me vale.
Sí. Yeah, that's